113 years after the Salem witch trials in Massachusetts, the small town of Bethel, Ohio experienced their own brush with the supernatural. Tonight, we learn about the story of Nancy Evans, the proposed witch of Claremont County. Insert opening music here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents the Hometown Haunts podcast. I'm your host, Kat Cloco, and with me in the shadows is Christina Wald and Jen Kohler. They'll be on a little bit later. Thank you for joining us tonight. Little bit of social media news. You can always catch us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and of course, we love to hear your hometown haunts, so please send them in to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. We love to hear stories from all over the world. You don't have to be just from Cincinnati. Also, we have a hometown haunts group on Facebook where a bunch of us chatter about weird and strange and unusual things that are happening in our neck of the woods. So please join us there. To the rest of the spooky lovers just like you, we can all just chat. Also, we are an official podcast that can be heard on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and SoundCloud. Thank you, Jen. Find us by searching Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities, and please rate and review us there so other spooky and weird history lovers, just like yourselves, can find us. Link in the show notes, as always. And this just in, not only did our Kickstarter fund, but issue 3 is going to be a reality. We just got over $8,000 in backers like 10 minutes ago. So, Christina, you want to come in and talk about this wonderful achievement we've achieved?
Woohoo! And hello, Jen. You don't have to be muted. You can unmute.
Hi!
Yay! I know. This is really great. It's a lot of work putting a Kickstarter together, and we're already excited about issue 3. Even though we set the initial goal under $8,000, the main reason for that is because obviously we need to make money to print this issue, but we need to make it worth doing the next issue too. And if there's not a demand for it, it's very difficult. I mean, it's hard to describe. We were talking about this yesterday when we were doing our live cast, is just how much time and effort it takes to put a comic together. I mean, Kat spends hours looking at coming up with the lists.
Me too.
Editing everything, looking at everything. I mean, everything takes a huge amount of time, putting together all the graphics for the Kickstarter, all the stuff. Tim, everybody, all 3 of us that put it behind the scenes spend countless hours on it. It's hard to say. I would say we probably all, Kat probably puts the lion's share of hours into it, but, the project management also takes a long time. It's just an agonizing amount of time to put this together.
Yeah. Yeah, Christina, myself, and Tim, who is not here, but we do a lot of we split the work up between each other. And I think Christina, we did a lot of the lion's share of work this year. And we just kind of went with the 2. Tim just message going, "That's outstanding," about the Kickstarter. Yes, it is, Tim. But yeah, it's me. I don't want to say badgering. I think as the editor, I keep track of everyone's progress and try to gently nudge them to getting stuff done. Right, Christina? You're going to get stuff done?
Like why I'm not done yet, and so that's why she's gently nudging me. But the gentle nudges might turn into more forceful nudges pretty soon.
Yeah.
But also, so I kind of handle all of the writing of the checks, and we deal with all the taxes and all the other paperwork that the Kickstarter generates. And last year I did all the fulfillment by myself. Hopefully I'll have some help this year. Because of COVID, it made it difficult for us to get together, so we wouldn't infect each other. But hopefully this year there'll be a bit more help on that. That was a huge amount of time too. I mean, I don't know how people that have thousands of comics to send out do it, because
they have employees. that
Well,
are
that's
greater
true.
than
That's
2.
true. That's true. But I do have friends that have started using fulfillment services that have raised a huge amount for their comic, perhaps on a Kickstarter, but they're their own, person. But that's still, there is no way around it. There's a lot of work involved from beginning to end. I think the
Mhm.
hardest thing too is Kat has to sort through all of the submissions, and we'll be
Yes.
talking about the submission process in January, and you have to read all that stuff and decide what's
Yes.
going to work and how the issue's going to go together. So there's just endless stuff, like all the promotion. It's hard to describe just how much
Mhm.
effort goes into this unless
Yeah,
you've
there's
done it.
a lot of effort on my end at the beginning and at the end.
Hmm.
So, at the beginning, I'm sorting through all the submissions and then also trying to link groups together. If there's a writer that needs an artist or an artist that needs a writer, I'm finding people. And Christina, you have a hand in that too, trying to get good matches and whatnot. And then approving and sending all the approval letters, and then getting feedback on the thumbnails and reading through. And then I read through everyone's scripts, everyone's thumbnails, and then I check their layouts. And I try to make sure everyone's main art is within the live area on each page, and also the word balloons. Holy crap. How many times people just shift their word balloons all the way to the edges of space, and they're just like, well, you could read that. And like, no, we can't, because this is the live area. This is the trim. Anything past this trim is gone. We
Yeah.
can't see it. So I had in I love our artists that use traditional methods for drawing, except for they get really mad when they discover all of their word bubbles are outside the live area and are going to get chopped off. I'm like, I'm
I,
sorry.
That's
You have to
painful.
move this.
yeah.
This is why we do this in the penciled layout phase, and not. I try to make sure that's all right before the inks start, because once the inks go down, they're hard to fix.
So,
So
how many submissions did you get for this issue, for issue 2?
we got about 8,
Okay.
and 6 ended up happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And hopefully we're already getting requests for submissions
Oh,
for
great.
3.
Great.
There's been 2 people that have come up and said, "Hey, we have ideas." So, and I'm
Hmm.
like, "Great, just still send me a proposal like everyone else."
Well, a
So,
proposal helps because that shows that you're serious. If you don't give a proposal, then it is hard to say, "Oh, well, you're serious about doing this comic." I mean, we are
mhm.
trying to be a real publishing company.
I think we're doing a pretty bang up job
Yeah,
of
I
it.
think
yeah,
so too.
we're a
Yeah.
publishing company now, so we have to think about the brand, and just as long think about the podcast, and two, how does the episodes fit with the brand? Does the comic work with what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
So, Kat, and this is a
Mhm.
little off the subject, but when you go through submissions, can I sit with you and see what you do? Just
Sure.
so I know what that process is like. Like, I have no idea what that process is like.
Sure. Yeah, and it will be, yeah, when that happens, I'll
Okay.
invite you over and we will look through all the submissions here in the
Yeah.
studio,
Okay.
because they're all digital. They're via Google document,
Oh, okay.
and it makes it very easy, because you can just it's not only just going through the submissions, but it's also transferring all the correct information over to a
Right.
spreadsheet. There's
Right.
a lot of office administration that
Administrative.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
nothing's as easy as it looks.
No, it
no,
never is.
there's a lot of project creep that happens.
Hmm.
Also, I do all the promotional interviews, which I
Mhm.
like doing. But in
Mhm.
the past week, how many have we had? 4?
You've
4,
done a
4 or
bunch.
5. Yeah.
You've been the face of this issue, which is good. But it's
And you
been a
look good
lot of,
on all of them. Yes.
That's
yeah. I mean,
because makeup. Just
Yeah.
makeup.
Yeah.
Good makeup.
it's something that we've been lucky to get a lot of press for this.
Yeah.
And that's why the product has to be good. If it was something really,
Yeah.
lower quality, then I don't think we'd get the press.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah,
has to be a good
it's
book.
definitely talking to all the people who have been interviewing, the reporters basically and journalists. They're impressed with the quality of work, and that we're not some schmucks out in the middle of nowhere trying to just sell our comics. This is a
Right.
preserving oral tradition, basically, and it's really unique. That
Well,
actually just reminds me of the interview yesterday with WCPO. The reporter is a fan of Chris Woodyard, who did the Haunted Ohio series from the 90s.
Ooh.
And I'm like, yeah, I read those books too. And the reporter thought it was really cool that we were basically just illustrating those stories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
Well, I think your combined experience too with publishing and illustration and comics and everything really lends itself to that, because you know the process, you know how to narrow down what you want and how to really truly tell a story. So, and that is immensely helpful, I think,
It
for
is.
publishing something. Yeah.
It offers a lot of good guidance too to the people who we're working with, because some of them are new, and then like with Kevin, he doesn't do too many sequential art pieces, and the same with Steve. So they did wonderful work, and
well, they're still good. They're very good storytellers.
They're very good storytellers, but it was fun guiding them, going like, here, this,
yeah. And I mean, comic anthologies are great ways if you like to do comics without the pressure of doing a whole book. You know, I think that makes it a lot easier, and that makes it easier to keep the quality really high through the whole book when you're doing a smaller thing. And it's a great showcase of local talent, which Cincinnati has an incredible amount of talent. Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky have a huge illustration population, and there's a lot of crossover in the different groups, and it's really exciting to see the new work each time. You know,
I was going to say, speaking of new artists, we have James.
Oh, yes.
Who did work on this anthology piece.
Yeah, and last one too. He did a sticker in the last anthology, and he did a sticker in this one and a pinup. So, and he promises he's going to do a story next time.
Yes. So he did the flapper pinup for those of you who are keeping score at home. But also, if you would like another podcast to listen to, James Ellison and Jeremy Jackson have the Box Office Invaders podcast, which you can find on Spotify. There's a few episodes up already. So please go follow our friends at Box Office Invaders podcast.
I have to say I admire their use of movies from my era. I see already they have Back to the Future, Alien, and what was it? And Batman, all of which came out like a long time ago.
So you're telling me your era is timeless?
Yes, timeless. That's the word.
Yeah.
Timeless. I like that.
Yes.
We are all timeless. Thank you very much.
But anyway, moving on. I've got an exciting topic tonight, which
I think you found this one, didn't you, Christina?
Well, you know, I think the reason I was so fascinated about it was, you know, as a kid, my father worked at the nuclear power plant out in Moscow, Ohio. So we lived in Felicity, but Bethel was like the bigger town next door. And we used to go see movies in Bethel all the time.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, I did learn the first movie theater in Ohio was in Bethel.
Really?
Yes. And I think it was either for sale or sold. It was a small theater. We used to go there all the time to see movies.
Yeah. Was it a one-screen theater?
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It opened in 1908.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, in the before times, you didn't have quite as much media to choose from.
True.
As you do now.
Yeah. You don't get oversaturated or overwhelmed with media.
Yeah, I mean, back then you could see all the science fiction and superhero movies and fantasy movies because there was only like 3 or 4 a year if you were lucky. And now there's like 3 or 4 a month. So it makes it more difficult.
On multiple platforms that you may or may not have subscriptions to.
Yes. And you're like, do I want to get another one? How many do I want to buy?
I ran into that this weekend. There were so many things I wanted to watch, and they were all on Hulu. And guess what? I don't have Hulu, and I'm not getting it. I already have too many subscription services.
I know. It's hard to watch all of the stuff that you have already. And then
I know.
That's the modern dilemma. It's like you have a ton of streaming services, and the one thing you want to watch is on the service you don't have.
So at that point, you might as well either just rent it or buy it.
That's true. That's true.
That reminds me, just Ghostbusters, the original 1984, not streaming anywhere.
Really?
Who was
Mhm.
the who was the studio for that one? Was that
I don't know.
well? The reason I was wondering was they had said when Disney acquired Fox that a lot of the Fox movies that were available suddenly were not. Like they quietly took a bunch of them off, off the streaming services and stuff, probably to eventually put on their own streaming service. But I was curious if, that was who did Ghostbusters.
I
Well,
think
Columbia Pictures is the ones that made it.
Yeah, which
Hmm.
they've been gobbled years ago. I don't know who owns them now.
so. Is Disney slowly taking a monopoly on all the movies, and they're just going to put them in their vault and never release them again?
Sony Pictures has Columbia.
Okay,
Okay.
so I wonder what Sony streams on. Interesting.
They
I
probably
do-
do independent contracts.
Were you wanting to show it to Sai?
No, I just wanted to watch it.
Oh, I
And
have it on DVD somewhere.
oh yay. Yeah,
I don't know if we have it or
there's
not.
a trio of movies, and I guess we could talk a little bit about our Halloween stuff before getting to the main event tonight.
Oh yes.
There's a trio of movies that I always watch every Halloween, and that's Ghostbusters, the original 1984, Beetlejuice, and Hocus Pocus. And those are musts that happen within the Halloween Eve, Halloween Day, Halloween week. And we watched Beetlejuice last night and Hocus Pocus on Saturday. Sai did watch that.
Okay.
And
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
yeah,
it is.
that one. Yeah, he did not care about it. He went off and played with his Duplos. But
He'll appreciate it in a couple years.
Yeah, you can't force kids to like something, I guess.
no,
I
but
know.
I like it, so we watch it, and I still love the line. It's a glorious morning. It makes me sick because that's basically how I wake up every day.
Well, I
So-
mean, you can't beat the cast in that movie.
No, that's and I can't believe they're making a sequel to it. I think it comes out next year on
Oh
Disney
yes,
Plus.
I did hear about that.
Yeah,
Because,
Yeah.
so
um,
infinitely curious about that. So, what about you two? What do you do on Halloween? What are your Halloween customs?
Normally, I just go over to my sister's and I'll either hand out candy at her house, or I go trick or treating with my niece and nephew. But because we all know how I don't hand out candy at my house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've heard about the reputation you have,
Mhm,
lady.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
The kids don't deserve it because they're not nice to me.
Mm.
So that's generally what I do. This weekend I spent it with my friend Chris. She came over, and Saturday we watched, I don't even know how many horror movies, but we watched so many horror movies.
well, that's awesome. That sounds like a great way to spend the day.
Yeah.
And it was fun. But if I don't do that, I just stay at home with the lights off and the TV down low and watch scary movies.
Well, that's cool. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff streaming right now, even though Ghostbusters is not one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we usually, Troy usually hands out candy. It scares the cats when people come to the door.
No.
But it's usually pretty low key. We used to carve pumpkins. We don't really do a lot of that stuff anymore. I don't know why. Probably, I mean, it's just one of those things where
It's a lot of work.
well, it's not so much as a lot of work. I mean, there are shows. I mean, we always like to watch The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror.
Oh yeah.
And usually at least one station will stream them. I think FFX would show like a marathon of the Treehouse of Horror, which I think there's, what are there 20 some of them, or because I don't think they had one every year. There's like one less or one or two less than the years of The Simpsons. And so we like to watch those. I think my favorite, and I don't know if this counts as a Halloween movie. It kind of goes in with the theme of our show today. Because one of my favorite movies growing up that's a Halloween movie, but it takes place at Christmas actually, is called and Bell Book and Candle, which I don't know if anyone has seen it here. Have you seen Bell Book and Candle? It was made in the 50s. And the thing that's really interesting, it starred Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. And Kim Novak is a witch. And one thing that's really interesting about the story of Bell Book and Candle is the writer of it was actually writing about the gay culture in the 50s, only they were witches. So they have like these secret clubs in New York City where they meet. And, the story is about a witch who puts a spell on Jimmy Stewart on a bet because Jimmy Stewart's engaged to a rival that she went to college with. And there's a cat in the story named Pyewacket, which when I was little, I named my cat after. And Pyewacket lived up to her name. She was the meanest cat we've ever had. She lived to be like 19, and she used to hold relatives hostage by sitting on their lap. And if they would touch her, she would try to attack them. So,
wow.
So the good die young, apparently. So she was a very memorable cat in our pantheon of cats.
That's funny.
But the movie's really good. You can usually catch it on Turner Classic Movies. But it's a really interesting movie. It kind of talks about witch culture, and there's some funny lines because of course the movie was out at the height of the Cold War, and at one point she's trying to tell Jimmy Stewart that she's a witch. Spoiler alert. She's trying to tell Jimmy Stewart that she's a witch, and she's like, I'm trying to tell you something about myself that you don't understand. And he said, you're not involved in un-American activity, are you? And she said, no, it's very American since the 1700s, like, indicating the, like the Salem witch trials, because they're kind of up in the, New York City. And that was just the sort of line you would expect in a movie in 1958 when the Cold War was happening. But it kind of has the beatnik culture. The cast in this movie is crazy. It has Jack Lemmon as her brother, and he's another witch. And there's a couple other well-known actors that are in it. It's just a very interesting movie about witchcraft.
Yeah, well, I'll have to watch
50s.
it sometime.
Yeah, it's really good. It's very hip. It's got a bongo drum soundtrack. Very beatnik. Her brother Nicky, played by a very young Jack Lemmon, plays bongos in a bar called the Zodiac, and it's like the secret bar that all the witches hang out at, and it makes the witches look very hip and cool.
Oh wow! Huh.
Yeah, I have never heard of that movie.
Yeah, and the witches are actually very multicultural too. Like this bar, all the people from all over the world are there and hang out and tell stories. And it was just it feels like kind of a weird movie for Jimmy Stewart to be in, but I guess he was in Alfred Hitchcock's movies, and of course he's a publisher.
He and Kim Novak were in one together, weren't they?
They were. Was it Vertigo or Rear Window?
Yes,
Vertigo.
It was Vertigo.
Yeah.
Grace Kelly was Rear Window.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Hitchcock was known for his predilection for blondes.
Yeah, I was about to say I can't tell those two apart.
Yeah.
Well, it's just it's too bad that Alfred Hitchcock was such a lech.
Yeah, apparently he was not. There was a movie that what's that actor Toby something or other played him, and he played him really creepy. And
he sounds like he was really creepy.
Kind of like he was definitely up to no good shenanigans with his leading ladies. Not necessarily that it was. I don't want to besmirch or anything, but it did not go over well. The movie, people were angry at, how dare you try to take down this legend and blah 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 blah, because he's not here to defend himself. And I'm like,
he ruined Tippi Hedren's career. He wouldn't let her be in anything after she refused his advances. To me, that's very creepy and Jabba the Hutt.
That whole situation was prevalent in the storyline in that movie, and it just man.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where and that's kind of the debate that's happening now with art. And if is the art still good if the artist was a total lech?
I think so, but who knows? It's all twisted. Call. It gets all twisted.
Yeah, this sounds like one of James's 2 bottle episodes that we should do.
Exactly.
But, we're getting back to witchcraft. Actually, Bell Book and Candle is a great segue to today's topic, which is the which I just forgot, the Bethel witch trial of 1805 which Christina found, and I
It was
think it's
just in the news the
fantastic.
other day, and I was like, wow,
Yeah,
this
Bill
is cool.
Reinhart just came out with an article about that for Ohio history. So, yeah, or not Ohio history, it was the public media.
Yeah, yeah, PRI was it? Or one of
Um
those I don't
it
remember which.
is I Idea Stream.
Ah, okay, okay. There's so many
But
things.
and that's a coalition of different, I think, NPR affiliate networks. But so tonight's topic sources: Bill Reinhardt's article from IdeaStream, right here at the top of my notes. Also, OhioHistory.gov and the Northern Kentucky Tribune. So, and then I also dug up the Amherst News Times from 1953 reported on this.
That's
So,
awesome.
Wow.
so shall we dig into tonight's episode?
Yes, please.
Topic? All right. So, the village of Bethel, Ohio was founded in 1798 by Obed Dunham and was part of the Northwest Territory, and it's located 30 miles east of Cincinnati. But by 1805, when our story takes place, the state of Ohio was just 2 years old and the village had been renamed Bethel. The two oldest Hildebrand sisters, which are identified as Fanny and name lost to history, began to act out in strange ways and profess to be possessed by evil spirits and scream at things that only they could see. The spiritual oppression was so severe that it prevented the young girls from doing their daily tasks around the homestead in Bethel. She would scream, tear her hair, and wiggle around on the floor, something terrible. Sometimes, in the night, she would awake with a start, give a yell, and so keep the whole family awake the rest of the night, writes Harry H. Hale for the Amherst News Times in 1953 for True Tales About Ohio. And this is via Ohio Memory. Distraught, their family performed a rudimentary exorcism on the sisters. It is described as using a large linsey-woolsey bag to trap the witch after others spoke some incantations. After the witch was caught, the bag was taken outside where it was chopped up into thousands of pieces by an axe and then burned. However, the spirit oppression continued, and eventually the girls reported witnessing the form of their elderly neighbor, Nancy Evans, during the attacks. This led the Hildebrand family to accuse their neighbor of witchcraft. Nancy Evans and her family, of course, denied that she was a witch. The only damning evidence was that she owned a black cat. The Hildebrand family ostracized the Evans family, but the spirit oppression continued with the girls. Now desperate, the Hildebrand parents called the justice of the peace to solve the issue and prove whether or not the elderly Nancy Evans was a witch. This was to save their own daughters' mortal souls. The catch was that Ohio doesn't have any witchcraft laws on the books. We didn't write any after the Salem trials, so the justice of the peace needed to be creative with solving this problem. A crude but functional set of scales were constructed. They were pretty large, and they were large enough for Nancy to sit upon one side of the scale and for the holy book to be placed on the other side. This type of discernment of witches is actually quite old and practiced in Europe centuries before. If Nancy was a witch, she would be lighter than the Bible, because as a witch, she would defy the laws of gravity. Others would also say that the Bible's tome would be heavier than any kind of sin that the witch could have possessed. So, if she was a witch, she would go up and the Bible would go down. On the trial day, Nancy was placed on one side of the scale and the Holy Bible was placed upon the other, and the bystanders held their breath to see the result. The scale tipped to one side in favor of Nancy Evans. She was acquitted of being a witch, because naturally, an elderly woman is going to be heavier than a book. The Hildebrand family moved away from Bethel soon after. No word on if Fanny or her sister continued to be bewitched. Nancy Evans and her family also moved away to Brown County, Ohio, where Nancy passed away a few years later, a respected citizen of her new town. And that is the story of the Bethel witch hunt.
Brown County's actually not that far away from Bethel.
No.
It's not.
Not really.
It sounded like she moved like really far away. When really, it's not that far.
I
away.
was thinking Brown County, Indiana, which is also
Same.
within the Cincinnati area.
Yeah.
It's kind of out in that I don't want to say no man's land, but it's kind of a very well. I suppose every state is like you have these numerous like farmland counties. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just they're not very populated, and they're very rural. And
It was
and
probably a big distance then.
And hearing
Yeah.
the story, the quote from Mark Twain where he said he wanted to be in Cincinnati when the end of the world came because everything happened 10 years later there, came to mind hearing this story. The idea that they actually erected scales to put her on was so Monty Python, yet so deadly serious.
Yeah. Yeah, just from the accounts that I could read that you found, that was the most fair and judicial way that the Justice of the Peace, who is unnamed, his name has been lost to history, was able to carry out this test. Like he wasn't going to throw her in a pond to see if she sank or floated.
Yeah.
He was just I think the Evans family, because they did this is just me wondering, they must have been actually rather well respected. And there's another newspaper that noted that after the Hildebrand family left, the notable intellectual points of the town went up. Like it became a much more scholarly and intellectual town after the Hildebrand family left. And I'm like, gee, that's a burn. But
well, that's a huge burn if that was in the article. Wow.
Yeah, that was a huge burn.
About being objective back then, apparently.
Well, have you know that if it were me back then, I would totally have been the witch on trial.
A lot of older women did give herbs and do a lot of the stuff. Doctors didn't like them. They didn't like midwives. I mean, there was a lot of hostility.
Well, there's a lot of financial abuse as well. There was a lot of property claiming by...
Oh, you're right. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that happened a lot in Salem. That's been well documented since then, that a lot of the women who were killed, and also the one man and his dog, their property was seized and taken by the Justice of the Peace. And
it seems like there's a lot of nefarious. There's a lot of nefarious.
Very political.
Involved with
it
this
sounds
stuff.
like Nancy, her neighbors just didn't like her. Poor thing.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, she had a black cat.
And superstition just overtakes everything else. I mean, and like you said, they wanted, sometimes it was neighbor disputes. I'm sure, it was a way, perhaps in earlier times, if you had an irascible old woman living next to you and you didn't like her, that was a great way to get rid of her. I mean, I think a lot of it was neighbor disputes and people getting angry at each other, everybody up in each other's business, but it did seem, some old villages like in Germany, they killed so many people for being witches. And I think, I don't know, I didn't do a search before the show about, I don't think it's legal to make laws against witchcraft because of our freedom of religion. I think they would mostly get struck down.
Now
by the Supreme Court. Perhaps in earlier times they didn't, but everything when I was looking was there used to be a witchcraft law in England that was struck down not too long ago. And one of my big indulgences lately has been listening to the Broadway musical Six, and it's about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. And one of the things Henry VIII was most known for is he dissolved the Catholic Church in England and made the king or sovereign the head of the Church of England.
Yes,
and and the main thing that he got out of that, in addition to being there was a side benefit of being able to marry whoever he wanted. I mean, he liquidated all the monasteries. And when you go to England, if you both have been to England before, You see all the abbey still there, like falling apart. Like there's these old monasteries and churches everywhere that are gradually going into ruin because King Henry VIII took all their money.
Yeah. Well, actually, funny thing that you mentioned that was I looked up witchcraft acts, which is what these are called, and the first one was the Witchcraft Act of 1542, done by King Henry VIII, and it was let's see, um, it was repealed by Henry's son Edward the Sixth in 1547. So then there was another Witchcraft Act of 1563, and that one was repealed. It was 157 people were accused of witchcraft, and only 9 of them were men. There was the Scottish Witchcraft Act of 1563. That stayed around until 1735. Then there's the Witchcraft Act of 1604 by James I. And Scottish Witchcraft Act of 1649. And which also penalizes for devils and familiar spirits. And the Witchcraft Act of 1735 is the final one, and that one was the one that was repealed May 26, 2008.
Whoa, 2008. I knew it had been recent.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all.
So was witchcraft just basically science we didn't understand? And they're like, "Oh my God, it's scary. We must kill you. We don't understand."
It says a person who is claimed to have power to call upon spirits, foretell the future, or cast spells, or discover the whereabouts of stolen goods was to be punished as a vagrant and con artist, subject to the fines of imprisonment. The act applied to the whole of Great Britain, repealing both this 1563 and the 1604 English Acts. So that basically, and then there's the Fraudulent Mediums Act of 1951. So,
well, that makes sense.
Again, a lot of it was, there wasn't a lot of sound science or anything behind it. It's more, the church wanting to retain power and money and not, they're not crazy really about any kind of religion other than their own.
Right.
All I have to say is between being able to call upon spirits, foretell the future, cast spells, and maybe discover stolen goods, plus my red hair, I would be dead.
Yes.
Very, very dead.
There's like biblical things isn't there biblical things against fortune telling and all that stuff? It never has stopped anyone from using cards or whatever. People have always been super interested in it, but it is always, and perhaps because it's supposed to be slightly wrong, it makes people want it even more.
I just think it makes the world bigger. More things that you don't know.
There is the Witchcraft Suppression Act of 1957 in South Africa, and it's still in force.
They actually still burn witches and kill witches in Africa. Yes.
Really?
Don't do that.
Please don't do that. I didn't know.
Everybody has superstitions and stuff like that. I'm sure that would happen here. There are people here that would gladly burn witches. Fortunately, at the moment, the law's not on their side, but that doesn't mean it will be like that.
There are still laws where it makes reading tarot, and other divination practices, illegal. Just like the Suppression of Psychics Act. Because they're considered con artists.
Yeah, you just never know. Like some states have some very weird laws.
And unfortunately, there are people out there that do take advantage of those things.
Yeah.
Which is sad,
Yeah, I'm trying to read where these places are. Let's see, there's the... there was a court case in 2009 in Texas where somebody sued the city of Euless, Texas, after they were told they could no longer perform animal sacrifices as part of his religious practice. Somebody else also was penalized for practicing Santeria.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, this is the same case. He was a practitioner of Santeria, and they told him that that was illegal, so he sued them.
Did he win or lose?
I am reading. Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans said that the ULIS ordinance placed a substantial burden on the plaintiff's free exercise of religion without advancing a compelling governmental interest. So he won.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I'm sure like you occasionally see those articles that talk about all the laws different areas have and weird laws that they don't really enforce anymore. You know, a lot of them, you know, obviously are anti-gay laws and that sort of thing. And you know, I think they were declared, the Supreme Court a while ago declared most of those unconstitutional. I think most of those laws have been struck down by the Supreme Court because of freedom of religion. And so I don't think, even if that law was still on the books, I don't think like this
it would be taken seriously.
The man in Texas she was just mentioning, you know, was
the government was keeping him from practicing his religion.
Yeah, so I think that there is in this country a fairly broad Freedom of Religion Act. So I think you could use that, you know, trying to avoid the witchcraft stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people that are now like practicing Wiccans and stuff like that. And I think, you know, you would think people wouldn't be, there are still like crazy people that get upset about stuff like that. So I say crazy.
Yeah.
So have you guys ever met someone who was a witch or really kind of really made you go?
A lot of people that practice Wicca.
Yeah.
Okay.
It kind of go hand in hand with the paranormal community.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of them around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have relatives that practice and
really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's not super unusual.
Yeah.
You know, there's a huge pantheon of different types of, you know, variances. I mean, I suppose that's probably one of it's sort of people probably put together their own practice based on that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's sort of whatever you want, what you like. I don't know. That sounds weird. You know, I think a lot of times, a lot of it is sort of based on old practices and stuff. I don't know if there's sort of a, as a matter of fact, I know for sure there's not a standardized sort of feel to it. I think that's what attracts people to it, is that it's not standardized.
Yeah. You follow whatever you feel most attracted to. And then there's also people that practice it, and I think they're called eclectic Wicca or eclectic witchcraft, which is it just cherry picks whatever they're drawn to. So there's some that follow more Egyptian lines or Greek lines or Druid, but then you have also eclectic. So, and then you have root workers too, and hoodoo, voodoo, that kind of stuff. Do we have a hometown hunt?
We do not. We used them all up last week.
Oh, okay.
New ones. So we will try to have some for next week, actually.
Yeah.
I'll ask. It's kind of been, you know, with the wrapping up of the Kickstarter and, you know, a lot of other stuff and deadlines. I didn't do a call out for that today.
Tree on. Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Was just going to say, I'd be interested to know if anybody has any kind of family lore about, like, if there was they had a witch in their family, or maybe if they are descendants of Salem witches or anyone that was accused of a witch. That'd be kind of cool to know.
Yeah, like, was it Alice Nutter? I have a friend who is a descendant of, I believe her name is Alice Nutter, one of the witches condemned in Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Alice Nutter, not Alice Cooper.
Well, he's kind of witchy.
She was an English woman accused and hanged as a result of the Pendle witch hunt.
Oh no.
She's also a
So no,
prominent
she was
character
in she was in Lancaster, so not Connecticut. She was yeah. She was accused of witchcraft and hung
Oh.
at Lancaster Castle. So, yeah, I do have one friend who is a descendant of a witch.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Did her family lore, did they talk about it, or was it kind of like the unspoken?
I will ask her.
Yeah, that'd be kind
Yeah.
of cool to know.
Yeah, I'll get her on and see what her family lore is. But that is a very good question to our audience: is do you have family lore like that? And it doesn't have to be necessarily witches. It could be medicine men.
Yeah.
It could be root workers.
Healers.
Magic comes in a variety of flavors. So
Yeah.
in terms.
And I think that, and I hate to say that people were more superstitious in the past than they are now. It certainly has transformed a lot, but back at least, I mean, I would normally say, like, back then, people didn't know, for example, why Black Death was happening and would try to blame witches, but that kind of is still happening. So
I was just laughing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
do I have a headache? Is it a witch? Is it like?
well, people were like,
You
I mean,
foul demon, you make my head hurt.
I was going to say there's a lot of people that still don't, take the prevailing, you think about the plague that went through a lot of people just, I mean, there was no explanation why things would happen. And sometimes that fear would lead to them accusing other people. And I think I had heard that, that I was actually, we were talking about Cosmos yesterday. That was always an interesting story in the Cosmos, where they had Johannes Kepler, and he was the person that first figured out the motion of the planets. And his mother was accused of witchcraft, and in the narration they said then she was kind of an irascible old woman that was picking fights with magistrates in the town, and so they just didn't like her. And he thought, and Kepler blamed himself because he wrote the first work of science fiction about somebody going to the moon, and he thought that had put his mother in jeopardy. But it was really that people just didn't like her because she was, a crabby old woman, and people didn't like
and
crabby
voiced
old
her
women.
dissent.
I mean, let's be honest. A lot of it is people didn't like crabby old women. They talk too much, and they just
Crone.
was probably exactly they didn't like crones. That's why we're reclaiming crone.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess we're all witches here.
Yes. So, I mean, I think that's the thing that's interesting, and when you read stories like this Bethel story, there's always underlying things that happen. Why did it get this far? Why did they blame these women of being witches? And we're actually seriously thinking out what are punishments we can do or whatever,
And she was the only one accused
Yeah,
of
she was the
witchcraft?
only one.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was really the Hildebrand family that
Was causing the
seemed to have
problems.
chased it. The justice of the peace was like, okay, how can we get this resolved quickly? Let me find out a way. And so he came up with just using the old school tactic of weighing the witch and seeing if she was lighter or heavier than the Bible. And he probably knew what the outcome would be. And if he could just get the Hildebrand family to shut up, that I think was his goal. And then eventually they just left. And
well, I'm glad it had a quote unquote happy ending, that she
yes,
was
No
able
one
to
was
live out her
killed.
natural life.
Yeah. I know one article did point to possibly epilepsy being the cause of the girl's spirit possession and oppression, but without more information, this is just maybe that could have been. It's just oral history now. It's folklore now.
Yeah, and I mean, this is really interesting folklore. That might be even interesting as a comic topic. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, that, and we also have the witch's tree,
which we were talking about yesterday. But a quick recap.
Yeah.
Ooh, what's the witch's tree?
Oh, okay. You want me to quickly recap it here? So this is a Northern Kentucky story, and it kind of branches off of Nancy Evans' story in Ohio. And what we have is a trio of women who practice witchcraft in Cincinnati and are discovered and chased away from their home. So they flee to northern Kentucky and establish their own little, not quite a coven, but their own homestead there.
Hmm.
And it doesn't take long for basically rumor to grow again that they are witches. So the community finds them and then hangs them at a large tree that grows on a hill. And that tree still stands, according to legend. At the bottom of this gnarly, twisted tree are 3 very large bumps that have been paved over with a road, but still persist to this day. And it is said that those 3 bumps are the bodies of the witches who have cursed the land underneath that tree. So that is a very quick story of the witches tree. We
I'm
also
not
have a
gonna see
witches
it.
tower in Dayton.
Really?
So, which I think is another cursed tree.
Can
So
never
we have
have
a
too
lot of
many
witches
cooks.
around here.
I like creepy trees.
What I
Yes.
like about this story, and I say like in a kind of sardonic way, is that they did get the method of killing an American witch correct. A lot of urban legend witch deaths say that they are burned in trees and cemeteries, which is
Mm.
utterly false. This is just a cover up lightning that has struck a tree in a cemetery.
Mm.
No one was ever burned to death as a witch in the United States. We hung our witches, thank you very much. We did not burn them at stakes.
Mhm.
We also weighed them first. So
So this is kind of a side note, but you know how when they have these tree pods that you could put your cremains in or your to make you a tree.
Mhm.
I was talking to my brother one day and I'm like, I want to be a tree. Wouldn't it be cool to be a tree? He goes, I could totally see you being one of those nasty, mean trees that will just shed shit everywhere and dump branches on people just for spite. And I said, yeah, that'd be fun.
People would like feel a branch hit them.
you'd be a ginkgo tree. You
Or,
shine
you know,
yellow
one of
and
those
golden,
trees-
and in the spring, you just fart on everyone. Your
Yeah,
seed pods.
that'd be funny. Or
Mm.
just one of those trees that just falls over at the right time and crushes someone's car
Exactly.
Oh, jeez.
without them in it. I'm not saying like hurt people, but
You're
make
a
their
vindictive
day
tree
a little
lady.
bit worse.
You are a vindictive tree.
Mhm.
Oh, I just think it would be funny. It'd be like haunting your friends after you die.
Just wait until a dog pees on your bark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd be like, oh, thank you, sweet puppy. It's okay.
Well, on that note,
Puppies are different.
Oh, so you're not going to drop a branch on a puppy that pees on your
No,
trunk.
I like puppies.
what about cats that climb the tree? Would you like
Or
make a little
deer
bed?
that-
Oh, I would not let that cat go.
Oh,
Kitty cat can sit in my tree.
Oh,
the
good.
legend of the skeletal cat. The tree that eats the
I
cats.
will love them to death forever and ever, like Elmira. I will love him and squeeze him and hold him.
Legend holds that somewhere in western Cincinnati there is a tree that will hold your cat, and the tree
And never
is
give it
full
back.
of skeletal cats. And on
Mhm,
windy days, you can
mhm.
hear them meowing in the wind.
The
I
bones
love
rattling.
that idea as a little cartoon.
That'd be fun.
I know. I
You
like
could
that
do a
idea.
crone crazy cat lady in the tree.
That's true. I could. I mean, crazy cat ladies are kind of all the stories, but I like the idea of the tree, the
Yeah.
cat tree.
She wears a fur coat of live cats.
Yes. And throws them at you when you piss her off.
I think there's already a character in The Simpsons like that.
Yep. She's one of my favorites when you just see a random cat flying.
Yeah. I think she's a favorite of many.
Yeah.
But on that note,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you for joining us for another cat-filled episode
I know
of the
where was
Cincinnati Cabinet of
Yeti?
Curiosities.
Where was Yeti?
Yeti was barking downstairs.
Oh,
Yeah, my new dog. For those who don't know.
but
So
we
thank you
digress.
for joining us for this wonderful podcast. You can follow us at Sin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and please, oh please, send us your hometown haunts at hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to join our Facebook group, which is just Hometown Haunts. I'm Kat Cloco. We got Christina Wald and Jen Kohler. Thank you for listening. Good night and stay weird.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Broadcast.